Hello YTPC, Ethan, Parsimonious Piper here. Today we've got some morsels for mental manducation. But first, I'm smoking the last of my Milan Tobacconist's Reflections in my Meerschaum Bulldog. So we didn't have a morsels last week, which means I've got a lineup of them this week. I'll try not to make it too long. First up, Portland is still besieged by BLM and Antifa rioters. I thought this was supposed to go away. Washington, D.C. over the weekend played host to a lovely combination BLM and Antifa F the Police march, in which not only were restaurant patrons abused, a couple of police officers were assaulted, and the marchers went through the streets chanting, "If we don't get it, burn it down." That sounds an awful lot like incitement to me. Where's the big media coverage? San Francisco, the gift that keeps on giving. San Francisco Public School District has decided to rename schools which currently honor Washington, Jefferson, Francis Scott Key, Paul Revere, and others. Board member Mark Sanchez says it's a moral lesson. Now, I sincerely hope that you have identified some perfect human beings to name these schools after, because it will be awfully confusing having a ton of schools named for Jesus. One of his first actions as president, Biden signed an executive order requiring the wearing of masks on all federal property. Why is it that we so often see him not wearing a mask on federal property? Just curious. Last week on Twitter, someone posted in reference to the New York governor, and I'm going to read this so I get it completely right. If you see anyone from the Cuomo administration in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them and you tell them they're not welcome anymore anywhere. End of quote. Democrats, including quite a few legislators, were up in arms denouncing this violent language and attack on a public figure. Turns out that quote was just a beautiful troll, because if you substituted Cuomo back in for Trump, you have a quote from Democrat Representative Maxine Waters. Why does she still have a Twitter account? Having trouble keeping this lit. In Cleveland, Lyft recently fired a driver. She picked up two passengers, young males, in a sketchy part of town. They proceeded to choke and punch her. Fearing for her life, she drew her legally carried concealed revolver or pistol and shot one of them, whereupon the attack ceased and the men fled. Lyft fired her anyway. You see, the left would rather have a dead driver than one who can defend herself. Think about that when you ride share. Focus on the Family had one of its Twitter accounts suspended for stating the obvious. Dr. Rachel Levine, nominee for Assistant Secretary of Health at the Department of Health and Human Services, and this was their quote, is a transgender woman. That is, a man who believes he is a woman. End quote. This is just the truth. It's not a hate speech. It's not a hate statement. There's nothing incorrect about that statement. But we're no longer allowed to speak truths that are uncomfortable to the left. On that front, the Virginia Citizens Defense League, a prominent Second Amendment pro-gun rights organization, been around for quite a while, had their account suspended on Facebook. They had their page permanently deleted, is what they've been told. No explanation of what terms exactly they violated. No explanation will be forthcoming. Facebook simply doesn't like their politics. This is cancel culture, folks. If you don't like it, just pretend it doesn't exist and silence it. At what point will it become painfully clear that our social media platforms are not neutral content providers or platforms for content, that they are in fact editorializing and no longer deserve, if they ever did, protection as publishers under federal law? After years of telling us that our southern border is not a security issue and that this is just a fear-mongering nightmare created by the right, Border Patrol apprehended 11 Iranians illegally crossing our southern border. For the last 4 years, we were bombarded with the accusation that the previous election had been stolen in collusion with the Russians. Bloomberg News reports the following quote from Vladimir Putin. He said he was looking forward to working with Biden because the values of the Democrats are similar to those of the Soviet Communist Party, of which he said he'd been a member for 18 years. Speaking of collusion, Time, another rather non-conservative outlet, posted an article which actually comes out and makes the very direct claim that the 2020 election was, in fact, manipulated. Here's their quote. The participants want the secret history of the 2020 election bid told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people, ranging across industries, working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. The tweet that accompanied the article: the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. Saved it by manipulating it. Now, if I had written that tweet, my account would have been suspended. That's just a conspiracy theory, right? With that, light something you like. Enjoy your afternoon.